Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Candace. If you're new here, we're going to talk about the 10 stages of waiting on God's promises today. Now, okay, this is not like an end-all be-all list of you're only going to go through exactly 10 stages when you're waiting on God's promises. This is just a list that I came up with out of my own brain of stages that I've gone through while waiting for various promises that God has given me over the years. And I thought it might be helpful to share it with everybody else. That way, you know you're not alone going through these different stages, and that, I don't know, I guess it's comforting just to know that you're not alone in that, and encouraging knowing that, yes, other people have gone through this too, and that there is hope at the end of it all, okay? So, these are not in any particular order. You're like, these are not of, oh, you're going to go through these exactly in this order sort of a deal. This is just the order that I normally go through, I guess, when I'm waiting on a promise. Depending on what your promise is and how long you've been waiting for this promise from God will depend on, if you go through all of these stages, some of them, just a few, or even more than this. I mean, if you have gone through a stage that's not on this list, I would love to hear about it in the comments, just so, I can add it to the list. But let's go ahead and get started. So the first stage that I normally go through when God gives me a promise is questioning that promise. And not in not in a disbelieving sort of thing, but kind of when God gives me a promise, I'm like, wait a second. Really? You sure about that? Did I hear you correctly? Is that what you really want? Sort of a way. Now, questioning you, I also get into questioning God about how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen. You might question how you're going to prepare for it. Questioning is something that it could be a stage, or it could just be something that kind of cycles around. And like with a lot of these stages too, you might not just go through these once, they might cycle. So you might have to go through them 3 or 4 times before, you finally get the promise showing up. But let's go into number 2. The second stage that I've listed is anticipation. So God's told you about the promise, and now you're anticipating, okay, when's it going to happen? Is it going to happen today? Is it going to happen today? Is it going to happen tomorrow? Is it going to happen next week? You start just anticipating it and kind of getting a little bit excited about it. And at the same time, you're like kind of thinking about it a lot and maybe worrying about how it's going to happen, or just thinking about it in your brain of, okay, well, I see this happening. Is that going to work there? Or is this going to come about this way? And you start just anticipating it. It's a stage. The third stage is praying a lot. And for me, this looks like whatever the promise may be. So I had, a promise that was about a career. And so, or it was a particular job, more or less. But so I was praying about it. I was praying about all the circumstances surrounding it. I was praying that God would have me be prepared for it, praying that, it would all go along nicely, that relationships in that job would just go smoothly, with bosses, co-workers, all that sort of stuff. You get to the point where you're praying about it like every day, whether it's a promise about a career, whether it's a promise about a home, a spouse, kids, whatever it might be. Like if it's a spouse, if God promised you a spouse, you're going to be praying for that spouse, for their character development, for their relationship with God. You're going to be praying that their relationship with you will be well, and that you'll be prepared for it when it comes about, and that, you guys will both be doing God's work, and that you'll both come together and be better together than apart. If it's kids that you're waiting for, children, you're going to be praying for the kids, for your own parenting abilities. You're also going to be praying for the children and for, the pregnancy, and you're going to be praying for, how you and your partner deal with certain situations with them, and you're going to be praying about their future, whatever the promise is, there's going to be a stage where you're praying about it like a lot, like every day. Every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And that's totally normal. And then if you have a long waiting period, like I've had some promises where it's like 6 months, and then other promises where it's like 6+ years. So if you've got one of the longer waiting periods, you might go from praying a lot to praying very little. You might have had the anticipation, the questioning, getting your hopes up for it and everything, and you're praying about it all the time, and then you get to the point where you just stop praying about it. You kind of ignore it in a way, and just like you feel like you've prayed everything you could possibly pray for it, or at least everything that you thought that you could possibly pray for it, and you just stop praying about it for a while, or just praying very little. It's a stage. Where's my next one? Now, if you're at the point where you're praying very little and it's because you're feeling discouraged, you might be on the line for the next stage here, which is being sick of the promise, or getting angry about the promise, rejecting the promise in a way. You might get to the point where you've been thinking about this promise for so long, you've been praying about it for so long, you've been waiting about it for so long, that you're finally just like, God, I'm sick of it. I don't even want it anymore. I'm done. I'm mad about it. You know? You might be angry at God, you might be angry just at the circumstances, being that they're not coming together in the way that you thought they would for the promise to come about. You might be just sick of praying about it, sick of worrying about it, sick of thinking about it, sick of getting your hopes up, and then still having to wait some more. Been there, done that. There is hope on the other side of that. It's a discouraging stage to be in, where you're just kind of just irritated with it all, and it's totally normal. Like, I feel like when I was in that stage, I felt bad for being in that stage, you know? Like, you're like, okay, well, this was a promise from God. It hasn't happened yet, but I should be happy about it. I should be excited. I should be hopeful. Like, you feel guilty for feeling bad about it, which is weird, but it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to be angry about it for a while. It's okay to be sick of it for a while. It's okay to just be like, okay, I just can't think about this anymore for a while, and just to put it aside. Like, I've done that. I can only imagine, you know, like in the Bible, Abraham and Sarah, they waited like decades for their promise of children to come about. And I can imagine, especially for Sarah, like, because she wanted him so bad, and she was the one who was barren, so a lot of the shame in that culture fell on her, because, you know, she's the one who didn't have a child yet. I can only imagine that she probably went through this stage at some point where she was just like angry about it, sick of praying about it, you know, just kind of over it for a while. It wouldn't surprise me if she went through that, having to wait for so long. Alright, where were we? Number 6. Now, if you're in that downward spiral of anger, being sick of it, rejecting it, you may end up in a season of doubt. Now, doubt can really eat at you if you let it. I remember being in seasons of doubt with different promises, and you kind of go through this cycle of where you doubt what God said. Number 1, you doubt your receiving it, your ability. Did you hear him correctly? Like, was that actually what he said? Did your brain somehow come up with it? Like, you go through the whole doubting God, doubting yourself. Like, you doubt the promise itself, like whether it be a spouse, children, career, whatever. You doubt that it'll come to pass. Like, you may get to the point where I was for a while with a couple of promises, where you just get down on your knees, you're praying to God, and you're like, okay, God, if I somehow screwed this up, if this somehow is something that came out of my own brain and was not actually you, please take it from me, or please show me that I was wrong. Like, please give me the clarity that I need to know what you want with this. Like, if this isn't from you, then take the desire for it away. And when you get to that point, God does pull through, guys. He will pull through, and he will guide you through it and like reiterate the promise if that's what you need. He will give you affirmations. He will encourage you. When I went through my season of doubt, I should say seasons, because I've had multiple promises, but seasons of doubt, what got me is I would go back to the, okay, God, did I hear you wrong? Is this not actually what you said? And the confirmation for me that it was what he said was back in stage number 1, because every time God has ever given me like a word or a promise in my spirit, my first reaction is, really? You sure about that? Is that what you just said? Is that what you want? And so for me, going back to the beginning of when I got these promises and being like, okay, well, I was kind of scoffing at them to begin with, which obviously means that this was not manufactured by my own brain, because my own brain would not put something in my brain that I would automatically like be like, huh, you sure about that? Kind of in a weird way, roundabout way, confirmed that those things were not from me and that they were from God. And with multiple promises over the years, seeing those promises come to pass is the ultimate confirmation. And as you get older and you go through more life experiences and you have more promises from God, you can look back at those older promises and be like, you know what? Every time he said something, he came through. And that just gives you more strength to weather through the seasons of doubt that will inevitably come. All right, stage, what are we on? Number 7 is straightening out your priorities, and also aka an idolatry check. So when you're thinking about the promise, you're worrying about the promise, you're waiting on the promise, it's very easy to consume yourself with the promise. It's very easy to connect that promise not happening with God's goodness in your life. Like, and by that I mean, you know, being like, oh, well, it hasn't happened yet, so I'm going to doubt God's goodness, because if he was good, he would give me what I want, right? I think this is a stage that we all go through for a little while. We like get mad at God because he's not giving us what we want. But at the same time, it's not necessarily the anger, it's the feeling hurt. You know, feeling like God didn't pull through, or like feeling like God said something and somehow you screwed it up, and so you get this kind of strained relationship with God for a while. And it's not something that everybody goes through. But this is where the stage of straightening out your priorities is important, because God should always be number 1. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. God should always be in the number 1 spot in your heart. And if he's not in the number 1 spot in your heart, then whatever is in that number 1 spot, you could be making an idol out of it. And God does not like, he gets very jealous. He doesn't like it when we put things above him in our hearts. And so, I mean, you can make an idol out of anything, really. You can make an idol out of copious amounts of time spent on television or video games or reading novels or your spouse or your children. Like, you can put your love of all of these things before God, and even then some. I'm sure you could come up with a million different things that you can turn into an idol. But that's the thing. God will not give you your promise if you've made it into an idol. So there's always comes a time to do that quick check of, okay, is this something that I am putting ahead of God? Because if it is, I need to flop it and put God back as number 1. Then we're moving on to stage number 8. Stage number 8 is when your faith starts really strengthening. So you've gone through a lot. You've been waiting a long time. You've gone through the doubt. You've gone through the praying a little, praying a lot. You've done a lot of the things. And you get to the point where you're like, okay, well, you know what? This is God's promise to me. He said it. I believe it. And so you start going through the season of just reaffirming it to yourself that, yes, God is good. Yes, God is faithful. Yes, God fulfills his promises, and you're just saying it to yourself over and over and over again until you believe it. You might be listening to a lot of worship songs that talk about how he's faithful or talk about standing on his promises, stuff like that. I know I play a lot of those types of songs on repeat just because they're good to have and they're really good songs. As your faith is strengthening, you become closer to God because you're like, God, I know you're good. I know you're going to come through with this. I'm having faith in you here. I'm stepping out on a branch and just going all in and having faith that this is what you said, this is what you want for my life. So I'm going to prepare for it. I'm going to be ready, do what I can. Let's go. Then, once you've done all of that, you might get to the point where you're really excited about it. That's stage 9. 9 is excitement. So once you've gone through, and again, you could do these in any order. I'm just saying this is the way I went through them. But for excitement, you get to the point where you've done the praying, you've done the things, you've done the doubt, you're on the other side of that season of doubt, and your faith has been strengthened, and now you're like, okay, this is something that's going to happen. This career, or this marriage, or this, these children, or whatever it is, it's going to happen. And now you start getting a little excited about it. You might be excited about it at the beginning too. Everybody's different. But once I've gotten through all those stages, now I'm like, okay, I'm excited for this to happen. I am actively looking forward to it. I'm not angsty about it. I've done all the doubt, done all the being angry about the promise, praying a little, praying a lot, blah, blah, blah. Now it's just, being excited for God's provision and what he's going to bring about. And once the next stage, we'll just call it that. The last stage on my list, and this is a stage that I think that is really important because it's a stage that we all need to get to before, God fulfills the promise, is a stage of patience, acceptance, and peace. And what I mean by that is you've gotten to the point where you're not worried about the promise anymore. You're not overthinking it. You're not striving or trying to make it happen on your own, which can be a bad symptom of, going with the doubt and all that. Don't try and strive and make the promise happen yourself. Abraham and Sarah did that, and that didn't work out so well for them. It's a good life lesson. But once you've gotten to the point where you've gone through all the things, your patience has been tried, okay? And so it's been strengthened, and you're like, okay, I've waited this long. I can continue waiting if that is God's will. You get to the point where you've accepted God's timing of it, because let's face it, God is only going to give us good gifts. And if he hasn't given it to us yet, then it's not ready to be good yet. A good gift in the wrong timing can be really bad, okay? A car for somebody's 16th birthday is appropriate. A car for somebody's 2nd birthday is not so good because it's in the wrong timing, And God's like that with our promises too. He's only going to have it in the perfect timing when it will be good for us in its entirety. So you're accepting God's timing, and then you have peace about it. When you get to the stage where you're just at peace, because you're like, okay, whenever you're ready, God, I'll keep doing your will. I'll keep doing whatever your purpose is for my life. And when you're ready, it'll happen. I think that's the best stage to be at, really. It's one of those stages where once you've worked through all the other things, you get to the stage of patience, acceptance, and peace, and It's like you can just take a big breath of relief, you know? And I think it's really important for us to know that all of these stages are normal. You're not like at fault or something like that for going through these stages, and you shouldn't feel guilty for feeling bad in the ups and downs of waiting on God's promises. I mean, you're gonna have really good days where you're totally rocking it and you're full of faith and you're just like cruising with God and you're doing fabulous. And then it might be the very next day when you're feeling like crap and you're doubting and just having problems with it. Like, it's not a one day, one stage, you go through 10 days, okay, you're done. This could be cyclical, okay? Like, some of these stages might come up a few times until they're fully worked out of your system. Like the praying a lot stage, for me, in different promises, has come up multiple times. Like, you pray a lot, kind of get over it, then you're like, okay, faith is back, praying a lot more, and then you stop for a little while, and then you start thinking it on your mind again, and you start praying some more. You know, the doubt section might come around 3, 4, 5, 7 times, who knows? But what I wanted to do is I wanted to put this out there to encourage you guys that it is normal to go through all these things, and you will get through them. You're not going to be stuck in the doubt stage or the rejecting the promise stage or, you know, the praying a lot or the praying a little stage or the questioning stage. You're not going to be stuck in those forever. It's a cycle. And the quickest way to get through the stages is just to bring every feeling you have about the promise back to God. Whether it's you're happy about the promise, talk to God about it, or you're irritated about the promise, talk to God about it. If you're doubting it because you're not seeing anything happen that would make it come to pass, you know, talk to God about it. Bring it all to God. He will work you through every single stage. He will be your rock to lean on the entire time. And He'll get you through it until you're finally at the patience and acceptance and peace stage. And it's a beautiful stage to be in when you finally get there. Anywho, I guess I'll pray really quick, just for any of you guys that are in the waiting. Yeah. God, thank you for giving us your promises and for telling us about certain things ahead of time, even if in the waiting period we are not so keen that you told us ahead of time. But thank you for doing it anyway. You know what's best and you work it all out for our good. Every time you tell us something ahead of time, you make sure it happens. That way you get all the credit for it, and we can be shown time and time again that how faithful you are. God, I pray for anybody who's in their waiting season right now for a promise, whether it be career, home, family, spouses, whatever it might be. I pray that you would just wrap them up in your love and give them encouragement and strength in this season. That you would help them work through any doubts that they need to work through, any past traumas they need to deal with, any hiccups along the way, Papa, and that you would fully prepare them for the promise and for when it's going to come. And I ask that you would get this video into anybody's hands and ears who needs to hear it. And I ask all these things in Jesus Christ's name. Alright, guys. I'll see you next time.